Fred Ros was not the kind of man who stood out in a crowd. He was calm, polite, and quiet. The type you'd never guess had spent half his life surrounded by killers. But behind that calm smile was a man shaped by crime, loyalty, and fear. Born and raised in Amsterdam, Fred grew up in neighborhoods where crime was survival. Money, power, and connections mattered more than honesty. He learned young that in those streets, you either joined the game or became a victim of it. Fred wasn't reckless. He wasn't the man pulling the trigger first. He was the man making sure the trigger was pulled for the right reason. People said he had the mind of a businessman and the heart of a gangster. By the late 1980s, he had joined the circle of serious criminals, drug dealers, robbers, and killers. He worked with men like Willem Holleder, John Miramet, and Sam Klepper, names feared across the Netherlands. Fred's calm and intelligence made him trusted. He became known as a reliable middleman, someone who could arrange meetings, settle debts, and move cocaine through quiet routes. His connections grew, and soon he was part of Amsterdam's criminal elite. Every deal was dangerous. Behind every handshake was a hidden gun. Fred learned to balance crime with caution, never showing fear, never making enemies unnecessarily. Fred's name began appearing alongside Klaas Bruinsma, the godfather of the Dutch underworld. After Bruinsma's death, Fred kept working under new alliances, adapting, surviving, staying relevant while others fell. In the 90s, the Netherlands became a center for cocaine and ecstasy trafficking. Fred was right in the middle of it, handling logistics, arranging shipments, and collecting debts. But the higher he climbed, the more blood he saw. Fred and Holleder weren't just business associates. They were friends. They shared drinks, money, and sometimes secrets. But in the underworld, friendship and betrayal often grow from the same root. One night, Fred was involved in a violent attack that changed everything. It was supposed to be just business, but people died, and the police took notice. From that moment, his name was no longer just whispered. It was recorded. In 2010, Fred Ros was arrested and charged with multiple crimes, including the murder of Cor van Hout, one of the most famous kidnapping victims in Dutch history. Cor was one of Holleder's former partners, and his death shook Amsterdam. Fred was sentenced to life imprisonment. For most men, that would mean the end. But Fred wasn't ready to disappear quietly. He had one final card to play. In prison, Fred started to think. He watched other men brag about loyalty, yet betray each other in whispers. He began to wonder, who had really been loyal to him? Who had set him up? Then came a visit from investigators. They wanted information, names, details, everything about the underworld's operations. At first, Fred laughed. Then he realized something powerful. This could be his only way out. In 2014, Fred Ros agreed to become a crown witness, kroongetuige. It was a shocking decision, turning against the same men he once called brothers. The news hit Amsterdam's underworld like a bomb. Within days, threats poured in. People called him a rat, a snake, a walking death sentence. Men like Holleder knew Fred's words could destroy them. Fred's confession exposed the deep secrets of Amsterdam's crime families. He talked about killings, drug shipments, and bribed policemen. He linked Holleder directly to the murders of multiple associates. In court, Fred appeared calm but weary. He spoke clearly, describing in detail how executions were ordered and carried out. His testimony painted a terrifying picture of the Dutch underworld, one built on greed, revenge, and silence. In return for his testimony, the prosecution offered to reduce his life sentence. It was a deal that divided the nation: justice for truth or betrayal for freedom. Even behind bars, Fred wasn't safe. Rumors spread that hitmen were waiting for his release. He had to be kept in high-security facilities, guarded day and night. Fred's decision to talk didn't just cost him his safety. It cost him his soul. He lost his family's trust, his friends' loyalty, and the respect of everyone in the world he once ruled. In quiet moments, he thought of all the men he had seen die. He remembered Klepper, Miramet, Enstra, Cor van Hout, all gone, one by one. He realized that the underworld didn't create survivors, only ghosts. Fred's words in court tore apart friendships that had lasted decades. Men who once sat together at bars now sat in cells, cursing his name. His testimony became the cornerstone in the case against Willem Holleder. He told the court how Holleder ordered the murders of his own friends. It was betrayal meeting betrayal, a tragic mirror of their lives. Every newspaper headline carried his name. People debated whether he was brave or just desperate. Either way, Fred Ros had become one of the most talked about witnesses in Dutch history. After years of trials and hearings, Fred's sentence was reduced. He was eventually released under a new identity, disappearing into the shadows. But his old life was gone forever. He could never return to his neighborhood, his friends, or his old habits. Everywhere he went, he carried fear. Fear of being recognized, fear of revenge. He once told an investigator, "You think freedom feels good, but when you've betrayed everyone, it's just another kind of prison." Because of Fred's cooperation, more criminals followed, including Peter Leserp and others in the Passage trial. He had opened a door that changed Dutch justice forever. After his release, Fred stayed away from the media. No photos, no interviews, no appearances. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Even years later, he lived with constant paranoia. Cars slowing near his house made his heart race. Every shadow looked like a gunman waiting to finish unfinished business. His family suffered too, forced to relocate, change names, and live in silence. They paid the price for his choices, even if they never fired a bullet. Fred once said, "Loyalty only works when everyone means it. Once one man breaks it, it breaks forever." He had seen that truth play out in blood. He often wondered if he should have stayed silent, accepted life in prison rather than betraying old friends. But deep down, he knew too much evil had been left unpunished. In the Dutch underworld, there's an unspoken rule. Talkers die. Fred broke that rule and somehow lived. But his survival came at the cost of peace. Even when the courts forgot him, the streets did not. His name became a warning. Never trust anyone completely. Years later, investigations into new murders still mentioned his testimony. It had built a map of networks, showing how old alliances still influenced modern crime. Fred now lives like a ghost. No real friends, no contact, no peace. He once said, "I talk to myself more than anyone else." It's safer that way. Fred's story is not about heroism. It's about how crime destroys even those who think they're winning. Every deal, every murder, every betrayal leaves a scar that never fades. For the Dutch public, Fred Ros became both a symbol of justice and betrayal. To some, he was a brave man who told the truth. To others, he was the ultimate traitor, a man who sold his soul to save his life. After his release, Fred lived under a new identity, moving through small towns where nobody knew his name. He changed his voice when he spoke in public and avoided cameras in every shop. He understood that one careless photo could be the end of him. His home was small, bare, and silent. The curtains never opened, the lights stayed dim. He kept a radio playing softly at night, not for music, but to drown the sound of his own heartbeat when fear crept in. Even in freedom, he still had contact with security services. Every few months, an officer would check if he was still alive. Each meeting reminded him that he wasn't truly free. He was just a monitored survivor. Fred knew that his testimony had put others in prison for life. Sometimes he wondered if justice had been served or if he had simply switched sides in an endless war. Either way, he carried the weight of every name he'd spoken. He followed news about the ongoing Macro Mafia wars, the shootings, and the new arrests. Each headline proved one thing: the cycle of betrayal never ends. The players changed, but the game stayed the same. He often stared at himself in the bathroom mirror and whispered, "You're still breathing, so pay for it." His survival felt like punishment. Guilt was the rent he paid for life. Rumors reached him that some of Holliter's old allies still wanted revenge. He imagined them planning, waiting for a chance. It wasn't paranoia. It was experience. Fred wrote letters to his children but never mailed them. How could he explain who he was without destroying their peace? He kept the letters in a locked drawer, a father's confession that no one would ever read. One cold evening, someone knocked at his door. It was an old associate, gray-haired and trembling. The man said, "You did what you had to do, Fred." For the first time in years, Fred cried. He dreamt of faces, Cor van Hout laughing, Holliter shouting, and bullets echoing in alleys. He always woke before dawn, gasping. The past never died. It only slept until his eyes closed. In his loneliness, he began reading religious books, hoping to find forgiveness. He didn't pray for salvation. He prayed for silence in his mind. He started keeping a journal. Each page began with a name and ended with a memory of something he wished he hadn't done. He called it the Ledger of Truth. When he saw photos of Holliter's trial on television, he turned the screen off halfway through. He didn't need to see his own words destroy a man he once called brother. The deal that bought his freedom came with a curse. He had no friends, no real future, and no peace. Truth had set him free, but freedom had no warmth. Sometimes when he dared to go out for a drink, he'd hear a stranger whisper, "That's him, the crown witness." He'd pay his bill and leave before the whispers grew louder. He sent money anonymously to his ex-wife every month. It was his quiet way of saying sorry, though he knew money couldn't rebuild trust. Fred once revisited the old neighborhood at night. The bars were different, the people younger, but the fear felt the same. He left before sunrise, knowing he no longer belonged to that world. A journalist once offered him a fortune for an exclusive story. Fred refused. He said, "If I speak again, people die. I've said enough for one lifetime." In his journal's last entry, he wrote, "I wanted to be loyal. I ended up alone. Maybe that's what loyalty costs in this world." He closed the book, locked it away, and never wrote again. Fred Ros became a legend not because of power, but because of what he revealed. He showed that in Amsterdam's underworld, no secret stays buried forever. Today, no one knows exactly where he lives, but every gangster still fears the echo of his name. Because in the end, Fred Ros didn't just betray his world, he exposed it.